帮我的衣服抢一下，别弄我衣服上啊，要捞起来。Okay. We'll go to the restroom.
All right, so start up here, and I'll go over this again when Quinta gets back, but
A is honesty.
people often think of it being something exact opposite of this, but this is what it boils down to. Evil equals dishonesty in some form or another. The most dishonest of all acts being violence. Okay? Violence is the least honest of all acts. Unjustified violence or aggression. Unjustified violence or aggression
That looked like a you to me.
is the least honest of all acts. The reason it's the least honest of all acts is because it is a transgression upon the very identity of a person, his physical body. It's an aggression upon identity. And identity is the source of all other claims. Identity is the source of all other claims. You can't make a claim unless you are an entity with an identity. Identity is the source of all other claims. When I say other claims, I mean other than what? I mean, it's the source of all claims other than I am me and I exist. Other than I am, and therefore I own my own body, etc., etc., etc. Identity is the source of all claims that follow from you have to first exist and be distinct as an entity to make any sort of claim at all. That's why aggression is the least honest of all acts. But dishonesty is always the same form of thing. It is aggression upon identity. Aggression upon identity. And the core axiom of moral living, of moral agency, I guess, is reciprocal burdens. Reciprocal burdens says if
Identity what?
Identity, what are you looking at? Where?
Identity blank of all.
Identity is the source of all other claims. Identity is the source of all other claims, okay? So, the thing about this is as follows. Reciprocal burdens is the most important thing of all. This is the number one rule of moral agency. How to be good can be summed up as this. How to be fair. How to not sin / be bad. Reciprocal burdens says it may not always be the case that I should do unto you as I would have you do unto me. It may not always be the case that I should do unto you as you would have me do unto you. But it will always be the case that for the sake of this thing, define the scope, define the rules, everybody plays the same. Okay? So it basically says this.
What's AXIOM? Axiom of moral agency? Is that what it's saying?
axiom of moral agency. To fairly adjudicate any dispute it is necessary to define the scope of the argument and that which has already occurred must remain until conclusion. Right. So, here's the thing. Define the scope first. What is the scope of the argument? Important. If you don't define the scope, you may argue a long time before realizing you don't need to argue.
To fairly what?
To fairly adjudicate any dispute, it is necessary to define the scope of the argument, and that which has already occurred must remain until conclusion of the argument, which means there needs to be a flow. Needs a flow. What's a flow? It is a record of claims made, impacts, standing and not, and warrants in and out of play. So basically, all the argumentation events are specific things. They are not whatever you feel like, okay? If I make a claim, I've warranted it with a reason, and I produce an impact. Let's deal with that first. It's rule number 108. Be responsive, okay? So reciprocal burden says be responsive. Why does reciprocal burdens follow from be responsive? If you want your opponent, do you think your opponent should have to answer your questions?
No.
Yeah, they should. Listen, if I say, you should get in this rocket ship right here, Eric. We're going to go to the moon. This rocket ship's perfectly safe. Don't worry, I built it myself in my backyard. And you say, oh, really? What kind of fuel do you use? And I said, I'm not going to answer any of your questions.
Now we'll go.
Okay, so then you're saying, if you won't answer my questions about your point, what should you conclude about their point? If I say this is a red expo marker, but let's say I argue this. Because dogs wear hats and speak Latin, this is a red expo marker.
Where does it say dogs speak Latin?
Okay, so the point is it still a red expo marker actually?
Yeah.
Why is it a red expo marker?
Because it says expo.
And its color is red, right?
And it's a marker.
And so in other words, it's a red expo marker because you can see it is. Okay? Now if I tell you it's a red expo marker because dogs wear hats and cats speak Latin or whatever, what can you conclude from that? Nothing. It doesn't justify this conclusion. You may agree it's a red expo marker. It doesn't matter whether it's a red expo marker. What matters is whether or not the person successfully established that it's a red expo marker. If I say to you, you have to spend X amount of dollars to achieve this outcome, you may know that there's a way to do it cheaper. Oh no, I have a way I can do this super cheap instead. Doesn't matter. Unless you produce that reason, then my argument that it is too expensive remains on the flow. And that's what's standing. Okay? So reciprocal burdens tells us how each argument must be treated the same, regardless of who it's made by. Reciprocal burdens says all argument elements, like these things, impacts, warrants, claims, all argument elements must be treated person neutral. Af, neg, burdens. Okay. So what does this mean? It's got to be adjudicated person neutral means it doesn't matter if it's Hitler or if it's me who made the argument. This is a good surface for writing down notes on because it erases easily and you can reuse the surface to write something new on it. That's true. That's a good reason to believe that this is a good surface to write stuff on. It doesn't matter if Hitler says it, if I say it, if you say it, if a dog somehow says it. It doesn't matter. The claim being made is that good writing surface. The warrant being made is easy to erase. There's a number of reasons why you might negate this claim. You might say, but we don't want it to erase. We want it to stay up there permanently. This would be a bad surface for that purpose then. So we have to establish the framework of what we're looking to do in an argument. Define the scope of the argument. If you are making a claim, what usually starts an argument is somebody makes an initial claim of some sort that comprises the resolution. To be smart, if we, people and adults in the world yelling at each other sometimes, were to be smart, we'd make sure we define the resolution to begin with. And we make sure we set up criteria so that one person will be wrong and the other person will be right, as it must be necessarily. We can't live in a world in which argumentation does not resolve issues for the purpose of the argument. Just because I won the argument does not mean that we all agree with me. It means we all agree I won the argument. And that that's what is standing currently as an argument. Pending new data, pending other answers. But for the duration and scope of this argument, this is the point we should all agree on as an assumption going forward. Look, I've shown you that this is a whiteboard is good writing surface for us in this context because it's easily erasable and we can rewrite on it. You've given a reason that says, but it's a bad surface because it costs too much. But I pointed out that we already purchased that. There's no additional cost for us now. And so we might as well use it since it's already been purchased. You didn't have a response to that. You said additionally that it's a bad surface because it's too heavy and it'll pull down the wall. And I pointed out that it's been up here for a long time and hasn't pulled down the wall yet. If it were in fact the case that it was too heavy and would pull down the wall, why hasn't it done so? Can you point to any mechanism within the wall or the board here that is going to cause that to actually happen, or are we just assuming it's going to happen? You had no response to that. Therefore, for the purposes of this and this argument and upcoming arguments that may be related, this is a good surface. Now, if we are then saying, now we're looking to purchase one for the next room, next door, I don't have to re-find out the point about whether this is a good surface to write on. See, remember, that point's already been argued. I've already won it. Do you have any new points to respond to that? No? Then that needs to be not revisited again. You can't make that argument again about how it's going to pull down the wall, pretending as though we didn't already argue that out, or pretending as though it doesn't matter that you have no reason standing, you still get the impact. Impacts go down with warrants. Okay, so.
Eric, so
yes.
Is all argument elements must be treated person
neutral.
Person neutral.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether you are an expert, it doesn't matter whether you are a criminal, it doesn't matter whether you're a scientist, it doesn't matter whether you're a philosopher, it doesn't matter whether you're a little kid. The argument must be taken on its merits. So one of the good things about debate, one of the reasons why it's honesty training, is because it is meritorious. We know it is meritorious even if you don't agree, that we should use logic to adjudicate something. So a little girl's crying because she dropped her ice cream on the ground and it fell in a big pile of poo and she can't eat it anymore. There's no more ice cream for her. boo. And I go home and say, shut up, little girl, you're not being logical. That ice cream's already ruined. There's no point crying about it. I have adjudicated that issue on the wrong metric. She is not crying because logically she believes that she's able to retrieve it, but has chosen not to in some regard. She's crying because she valued the ice cream and it is lost to her. It is a period of mourning that she's undergoing for the ice cream. So it is true in that instance that it would not be a good idea to use this logic system to evaluate anything. When I say it's meritorious, I don't mean it's more meritorious than caring about somebody's feelings. What I mean is that it's meritorious in that when we do use this system, when two parties do agree, let's use this system, it treats all the arguments person neutral. It doesn't matter whether I'm white privileged, it doesn't matter whether I'm a little girl, it doesn't matter whether I'm a criminal, it doesn't matter how much information I have coming in, whether I'm an expert or not. One big misconception that people in general make is that expertise matters. Expertise does not matter unless you are having them do something in the physical world. If I'm saying, if I have a brain surgeon, obviously I want somebody who's a brain surgeon, not somebody who just sounds like they know about brain surgery. I want somebody who's got genuine expertise and the ability to execute in the physical world knowledge in ways that cause actual impacts to matter to me. But most of the time we argue, we aren't arguing about that. We're not talking about, should we get an expert plumber in here or should we get a amateur plumber in here? We're talking about instead arguments. And remember, number one rule is reciprocal burdens. And what does that mean? Again, it means all arguments must be treated person neutral. My identity doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is the argument. The argument is comprised of three sections. Let's go over this next.